This is video 2, 3.4b as in boy, for linear equations and one variable for pre-algebra. And right now we're going to jump into what are called equations involving fractions. Everything works the exact same, all the rules and everything apply to fractions just like they do anything else. But we're going to go ahead and do a few of those. That's example 5. Alright, so before we can do anything, regardless of whether or not we have an x on top or a number, we can't combine those two fractions unless first of all we have common denominators. So, common denominators, remember how to do that. You can either look at this and see that 6 goes into itself evenly and 2 goes into 6 evenly. So 6 is your common denominator. And so we're going to turn that 2 into a 6. And then we have to say, okay, what did we do to get that 2 to a 6? We multiplied it by 3, so we multiply the top by 3. So 3 times x is just written as 3x because you can't combine them. You can't do anything with them. And my 6 here doesn't change because it's already the common denominator, so that means the top doesn't change. Now I can add these two. Well, if I have 3 x's and I have another 1x, I have 4 x's. And that's over 6, and that equals 8. Okay, so we haven't run into this before, so I guess there is some new stuff in this lesson. We're trying to get rid of two different things here. We're trying to get rid of the 6, and we're also trying to get rid of this 4x. Alright, so, just the 4, so that we can get the x alone. So remember the rule, and let's kind of jump into something totally different from that problem. Let's go ahead and just write down 3x equals 12. Okay, so remember the rule that when we're trying to get rid of a number multiplied by an x, we divide both sides by that number, and that cancels, and we get x equals 12 over 3 is 4. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of go in a little reverse motion here. If we have a number, or an x divided by a number, like that, instead of it being beside the x, it's underneath the x. When that's true, when it's divided by 6, then we multiply both sides by that number. So when it's multiplied by x, we divide. When it's divided, we multiply. Okay, so that brings us to, these will cancel because 6 over 6 is 1. So x equals 12 times 6, or 72. Okay, so that's a completely different problem, but I wanted to show you that so when we do it on our problem over here to the left, it works. So we have 4x over 6, so we're going to multiply this whole thing by 6 and this whole thing by 6. And when we do that, this is 6 over 1, right? And 6 over 6 is 1, so that goes away. So I have 4x then equals 48. Now I can divide by 4, and my x equals 12, and I'm done. So this is example 6, and I'm going to show you a different way of solving these with fractions than I did in example 5. Both ways work. Both ways are fine. It's just you may prefer one way over the other. And this works when there's an equal sign, which there is when we're trying to solve for x and there's an equal sign there. This works. And what you do is before you combine your fractions at all, maybe you don't even like fractions. So let's make those fractions into something else. And we can do that by looking at the common denominator all the way across. So this has got 2x over 1. This is a 1/2, and this is a 3/4. So the common denominator for this whole thing is what is the smallest number that my two denominators will divide evenly into. Well, 4 goes into itself once, 2 goes into 4 twice. Now another denominator, a common could be 8 because 4 goes into 8 twice and 2 goes into it 4 times, but it's not the smallest one. 4 is the smallest one. If you used 8, you'd get the right answer. You just have to reduce at the end. This keeps you from having to do that. So 4 is the least common denominator. So if we make a parenthesis around the whole thing, and we multiply the whole thing by 4, the least common denominator, and then we distribute here, here, and here. Alright, so we get 4 times 2x, so we get 4 times 2x, and we get 8x. We take 4 times 1/2, well 1/2 of 4 is 2, and then we look across the equal sign and we get 4 times 3/4, and I'm just going to write that out. Alright, so we have 8x plus 2 equals 4 over 1, so I can multiply those and get 12, and that's 12 over 4, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. Now if you do this correctly, you will get rid of all your fractions. So we don't even have to deal with fractions now. We don't have to find common denominators. We don't have to do anything with them. They just all disappeared to this. And then we can subtract 2 from both sides to get my 8x all by itself. And so now I have 8x equals 3 minus 2 is 1. Divide by 8. Divide by 8. Those cancel. X equals 1 over, make a better 8, 1 over 8. So this is example number 7, and this one's going to be a little bit trickier because we have a denominator of x. We've never seen that before. So what we're going to do is, again, we're looking for a common denominator. Well, one of our denominators is 2, one of them is x. Well, what is the smallest number that both 2 and x go evenly into? Well, we don't even know what x is. So what we do is when we have a variable on the bottom is we just put these two numbers together and call it 2x and say that's the common denominator. So whenever you see this, put the number here and the number here together and it becomes 2x. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the entire thing by 2x. Alright, now again we're going to distribute just like we did in the last example. So I'm just going to write it out. I'm not going to actually multiply yet. And I'm going to multiply 2x times 2, and I'm going to multiply 2x times 1/2. So I'm just showing that I'm going to distribute that 2x and multiply each one of the terms by it. Now I'm going to do some canceling. I'll do this in green so you can see it better. Cancel that x with that x, and now I just have a 2 times 3 is 6. 2x times 2 is 4x, and I'm going to cancel this 2 with this 2, and I'm just left with a regular old x. Alright, so now I have to get my x's all together. So, a couple ways of doing that, but let's go ahead and move this one over here so that this number can stay over here by itself. So I'm going to subtract 4x from here, and I'm going to subtract 4x from here. So I have 6, those go away. Whoops. Yeah, so x minus 4x or x plus negative 4x. And I've got a positive and a negative. I take the difference between the two, put the sign of the largest on there, and I have that. Now to get rid of this negative 3, I divide both sides by negative 3. Those go away. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And I have one negative, so that negative goes on my answer.